folks, welcome back to my channel, and today I will be announcing the winner of this, the Platypod Ultra. For those of you who would not watch last week's video, I crossed 1,000 subscribers, and truly thank you to each and every one of you who has subscribed, and for that I said I'd do a giveaway, and that is the giveaway, the Platypod Ultra. I'll be announcing the winner at the end of this episode, but in the meantime, if you have not subscribed, you're watching today, if you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe. Hit that notification bell so that you are made aware of any new episodes as I produce them. With that said, today I want to talk about the Panasonic Lumix S5 II and its high-resolution capability. Now, the thing that I want to emphasize is that the camera is a 24 megapixel camera, but using sensor shift technology, it is capable of generating very high resolution, but not as high as what Canon just announced with their new firmware update on the R5. It's now capable of taking 400 megapixel images, but that's for another day. The Lumix S5 II will produce 96 megapixel images, which in my opinion is more than enough for most of the work that I typically do and a lot of the photography that you may wish to do. 24 megapixels is good, but if you need higher resolution, then instead of going and buying a camera that has a much higher resolution sensor, you can use the sensor shift technology. Bear in mind, it works best if you are on a tripod. It's not meant for handheld work, and it's also best if the objects are static, stationary, there's not a lot of movement. It's great for architectural work, it's great for product photography, and it is exceptionally good for macro, and that's somewhat my preference, and that's what I'll be showing you today. So the first subject that I want to use to demonstrate the capabilities of high resolution is a taxidermy wing of a butterfly. It's a little old, it's a little tattered, ragged, whatever, but still you get the idea of what the camera is capable of doing. So let's get on with how we set this up, and then from there we'll take an image, and then I'll also do a high resolution stacked image of a flower to see how well the camera actually keeps the images in alignment to allow you to do a really good stack. So let's get to the camera settings. So to set the camera for high resolution mode, what you need to do is to go into the menu and go into the first segment of the camera settings, and you can set the photo style to standard or to normal. That's fine, and you need to make sure that to get the highest resolution, your aspect ratio should be set to 3:2. If it's set to 3:2, your image size will be 12,000 by 8,000 in the XL mode, and in the LL mode it'll be half that. It'll be 48 megapixels, 8,496 by 5664. If you set it to a resolution of 16 by 9 or a resolution of 4:3 or a resolution of 1:1, your total image will be smaller based upon whatever the aspect ratio is. So if it is 1:1, your aspect ratio resulting images in XL will be 8,000 by 8,000. So to get the highest resolution, maximize the full sensor, use an aspect ratio of 3:2. Now, when you go into the high resolution mode setting, click on that. You have a few options. As far as picture quality is concerned, you have combined, fine, which is fine JPEG, raw plus fine, which will give you a JPEG and a raw file, or just raw. So my preference typically is, since I want the most resolution, and that's why I'm using this feature, I typically do either raw plus fine or raw only. Raw only works good because then I can manage the images in post-processing to the highest capability that my software will allow me to do. So let's just set that to raw, and then the simultaneous recording, that's basically to tell the camera to take one image which is not a high resolution image shifted capture. It's just a single capture as you would under all your normal photography. The shutter delay can be set from a quarter second, 1/8 of a second, or no shutter delay at all. My preference is to leave it at a 2-second or higher shutter delay, just to allow the camera to settle before it starts capturing images. The high resolution mode only works in the electronic shutter, so there is really not much possibility of vibration once the images are being captured. It's only that you could have some shake or some camera movement prior to the first image being captured. And in that situation, you should also be aware that since we are using the image stabilization to move the sensor, you don't have any image stabilization for high-res mode. Also recommended, do not try and do this handheld. It'll be a disaster. Your best way is to do it on a good, solid tripod. So let's leave this at 2 seconds. And then motion blur processing, mode 1 and mode 2. Mode 1 is really good for 90% of the high resolution image capture, as long as your subject is not moving or there are parts of your scene that are not moving. If you have a situation where parts of the scene are moving, like leaves or people, then you will end up with some motion blur. So set it to mode 2 and it'll help to alleviate some of that, but you might still get some artifacts of blurring that takes place, so be aware of that. Oh yeah, one more thing which you need to do is to make sure that your drive mode dial is set to high resolution capture, which is single shot, burst 1, burst 2, and then high resolution before you get into the time-lapse and timer modes. So what I have set up over here is my Lumix S5. Let me just raise this up and show that to you. So there's the S5. I have a lab jack, which is the blue object that you see below. It allows me to raise and lower my subject as needed. So I can actually raise it and lower it as needed. And on that is a white card with the segment of this butterfly wing. It's a swallowtail's wing. And the lights that I'm using are LumCube Panel Pro. This one, which basically is going to be the key light, and the second light is a LumCube, which I may or may not use, but this is the light that I will be using. I'll set it to 5500 Kelvin, so we have daylight balance light, and that's the intent. So the camera is set for ISO 100, f5.6 at 1/2 of a second. And what I'm going to do is use the 2-second timer and take the image. And it's done. So that we'll take this into the computer and I'll show you the image quality. So the camera basically has taken 2 images, one in high resolution and one in standard resolution. This image that you're seeing is the high resolution 96 megapixel image, and the next image, this is the 24 megapixel image. On YouTube, and unfortunately because of the way video is rendered, you don't get the full impact. But one of the things that is important to understand is that though these 2 images have been sized to represent what they would be on a full screen view, if you really look at this image, this is a comparison of the actual size of the 2 files. So the file size, the larger image, that is 12,000 by 8,000 pixels, and it's basically 4 times the size of the standard resolution file. And really where this comes into play is if you hone in into a very small portion of this wing, and if we were to look at the 2 side by side, the standard resolution and the high resolution, you will see how much of a difference there is in the quality of the rendering of these 2 images. So this is really what high resolution images will give you, is a far more greater amount of detail, and also to some extent a lot more color definition. Because of the way the pixel shift works, it allows for each of the colors to be picked up over a much larger area, unlike the standard Bayer pattern where you've got 2 green, 1 red and 1 blue, where the area coverage isn't really in its entirety. So this is really where the advantage comes up. So now let's capture a high resolution stack. So in order to set up this high resolution shot, what I have is my camera focused in on the frontmost portion of the flower. The flower is lit by a focusing flashlight. It's an LED lenser on its back. I want the light to come through the petals. And then I have a lume cube with a snoot focused in just on the central part of the flower, because the light does not pass through that density of those the central portion of the flower. So I'm giving it a hint of light from the front just so that it looks attractive. The camera will be fired using a remote trigger, and the next thing that I need to do is to set up the focusing rail to get the right amount of stack distance. Now, the stack steps are dependent upon the aperture. They are dependent upon the minimum focusing distance. They are dependent upon how far the subject is from your sensor, and that will provide you the stack step. Now, there are apps available for it. I like to use, when I'm in the studio, I like to use Photo Pills. There are 2 apps, one's for landscape and one's for macro. Make sure that you use the one for macro. But the basic formula, if you are focused at the closest focusing distance, is this one here. Now you do need to compensate based upon this calculation to give it about a 20 to 25% stack overlap, so you can figure that out. But let's use the PhotoPills app for this demonstration. And in order to do that, the first thing I need to do is to get the distance from the sensor to the flower. So I'm going to use this measuring tape and use the centimeter scale to see where I am. So I am at 45 centimeters, which is 450 millimeters. Now that will give me the calculation for the step distance, but how many steps do I need to take to calculate that? Once I have the step distance and I know the depth of the flower, then I can figure out how many steps I will need. So let's assume for a moment that the depth of the flower based upon this scale is 2 centimeters. So if the depth of the flower is 2 centimeters, and let's say the calculation comes out to be 1 millimeter of step distance, including the factors applied for compensating for any overlap, then I would need to take 20 to 21 images in order to complete this stack. So let's go to the calculator and figure out the step distance. So with the calculator open, let's set the camera. Unfortunately, the PhotoPills app does not have the Lumix S5 Mark II, so we will use an equivalent full frame, which let's say we can use the Sony, because the Sony has the A7R series, which is also full frame. The focal length of the Sigma lens is 105 millimeters, so let's just put that in. The aperture that I'm using is f5.6. We're not going to worry about the next item, which is applicable only for Nikon cameras. We're going to leave pupil magnification alone. We're going to now enter the focusing distance, which was 445 millimeters. When I looked at it, it was closer to 445, not 450. So I'm going to put 445 down. We do not have any extension tubes. We're doing a straight lens macro. So given those numbers, we now come up with a depth of field of 1.44 millimeters and a safe step size of 1.15 millimeters. Now that's with a 20% overlap. If I was to do a 25% overlap, I can safely assume I can use a 1 millimeter step. So what I would do is set my focus to the closest point, take an image, step forward 1 millimeter, take another image, step forward 1 millimeter, and so on, till I take the full set of 20 to 21 images for this particular subject. I'm not going to go through this entire routine with you. Let me just show you the camera view. So that's the camera view of what I am photographing. And I'm basically focused on the frontmost tip of this petal over here. So I'm going to take my first image. And now I'm going to step forward by a millimeter. Yes, it is a lengthy process, but if you want to get a high resolution image, this is the only way to do it. Now, clearly, if I have a faster shutter speed, the time will be reduced considerably, but in this case, it will take some time. And then once we're done, we can bring this into Lightroom and convert them into TIFF files, bring it into Helicon Focus, because at the moment Helicon Focus does not read the raw files from the S5. So convert it into TIFF and then do the stack in Helicon Focus. You can of course do the stack in Photoshop, but I think Helicon Focus is much more detailed in the way it renders the stack. So if I'm doing any high resolution work, particularly for clients, etc., I will do it using Helicon Focus.
I have all the files now imported into Lightroom, and what I'm going to do is select the 20 files. And since I have Helicon Focus as a plugin for Lightroom, I can do a file export directly to Helicon Focus. I will be using Helicon Focus export to TIFF files. I can do it in DNG, but it is easier and quicker to do it as TIFF files. So I'm going to export all 20 files to Helicon Focus. They will be exported and load up in Helicon Focus, and then I can render them. This takes a little while, so I will skip forward. All the files are loaded into Helicon Focus, and what you see is on the right-hand side the 20 images, all as TIFF files, that are being populated on the panel on the left. The image that you see on the screen is the last image of the series, so this is where the focus is at the back of the flower. The first image is where we have the focus in the front most section of the flower. I'm going to use the render method B, which is the depth map rendering, and so let's just go ahead and render the images. It's a two-step process, but it's fairly quick, despite the fact that these files are 107 megabytes each as raw files, and we should end up with a final file just a little above 500 megabytes in size. This is the final masking, and the image is ready. At this point, you just hit saving and hit save. What will happen is that the file will be saved and imported into Lightroom. As soon as I close Helicon Focus, I can go back to Lightroom, and you will see this file come in as file number 20, which is this one here. I can open it, and as you can see, it's sharp from front to back. Now I can do any kind of further adjustments, further development that I need to. I may want to just warm up this file a little bit, and add some highlight recovery, and then increase the temperature. And if you want to, you can adjust vibrance or whatever it is. But those are editing preferences that you have. So the file is basically ready as a stacked image in high resolution. And just as a point of reference, if we look at the directory and look at this particular file in the high-res stack, you can see that it is 576.1 megabytes as a TIFF image.
So with that, folks, we come to the end of this episode, and I hope you've enjoyed it. And once again, if you've enjoyed it, please give me a like. Of course, a thumbs up is always, a pleasure to get. And if you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe and hit that notification bell. Now, as I had mentioned at the beginning of the episode, I would be announcing the winner of the Platypod Ultra, and the individual who has won that on the random drawing is Greg Nowlin, Nowlin. Greg, if you are listening, if you're watching, please do get in touch with me. Leave me a message with your contact information, or email me your contact information, and I will be most happy to ship out the Platypod Ultra to you. With that, thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Take care. Bye for now.